Her name is Renee, which rhymes with play, which is something she believes we should do every day. She's this week's DesuckifyWork Podcast guest. She knows when we play, we're at our best. We're creative and alive, energetic and wise. We communicate better, less lows and more highs. Our mental health improves, we get into more grooves. We find more meaning, our soul approves. So how does this help me at work, you might wonder? We create agency and develop more trust in each other. We get curious about what makes each of us tick. We cut through the BS and enjoy healthy conflict. We need more third spaces, more room to play. To reimagine what it means to be an adult, let's listen to Renee. All right, Renee Bryant, welcome to the DesuckifyWork Podcast.
Oh, thank you, TJ. I'm very excited to be here.
I am excited to have you here. I think we're going to have a lot of fun. The topic will be really interesting for a lot of folks. The world of play is getting some more noise in the world, but I still think it's bubbling and it's not fully there yet. Yeah. So I'm curious to see where we go with it. Before we go too deep, do you want to just give everyone a brief background on what you do and how you came to be doing it?
Yeah, so I run a small business of my own called Play RX, which is kind of, play on words to like the play cure or curing adult emptiness with play. And I'm running this business in hopes of doing two things, sort of creating a sort of virtual space where I'm pulling in people from the outside world and we're doing virtual workshops. And eventually, I'm very excited about this, doing an in-person, almost third space community type center that could be really focused on pulling people into one location and providing what I'm calling creative play workshops specifically for adults. And the reason why it's specifically for adults is because for the last 12 years, I've been in education as a teacher, teaching students K through 8. I've taught every grade except 7th for 12 years. And I was an arts and drama teacher and poetry teacher. So a lot of my background and my degree comes from interdisciplinary art studies and performance. So like just a little bit of everything in the creative world. And I realized that kids in the last decade have been getting worse with a couple of things. Their mental health, specifically fear around failing. And that fear around failing really sort of sucks them into being pretty small in terms of exploration, sense of wonder, creativity. Like it's been shrinking. I've been noticing pretty steeply in the last 7 years, I would say. And when I would meet with parents every year, I started noticing oh yeah, this is obviously coming from home. This is coming from the adults, which is coming from sort of society, and it's trickling down to our children. And so I made the move to jump from working with kids to working with adults because adults suck at it so much worse that they're taking out the intuitive, natural instincts that their children have and then not allowing them the opportunity to individuate and become full agents of their own lives.
Wow.
And it's just so detrimental that I'm attempting to start a little bit backwards and working with adults in hopes of helping future generations, because kids know how to play, but somehow in the last few decades, it's it's getting taught out of them or pushed out of them. And I believe it's really dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, I can see how it could be, and I sense what you've directly observed in the culture a little bit. I don't fully understand what has driven that, meaning why we're sort of squeezing the play out earlier in kids' lives. I feel like we tend to squeeze it out of ourselves a lot through the teen years because suddenly all that peer pressure, and that's why most of us show up as adults with this inability to play because we don't want to look bad, right? But it sounds like you're saying it's getting squeezed out earlier and earlier and more frequently. Yeah. Do you have a sense of what's underneath all that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm genuinely seeing it as early as 5, as early as kindergarten, where these kindergartners are just terrified of making a mistake.
Mm.
Terrified. I'm literally the art teacher, and I'm like, you can make a mess on your paper. And like, that's the point, is to
Yeah.
like figure out which colors make what other colors. And like, you're exploring like on this big
Mm-hmm.
piece of paper. And I've got kids that are like crying in the corner because they're so scared of
Mm.
like making a problem, making a mistake, like something is happening. And then a lot of them are fine.
Yeah.
Um, but to see it that early in like significant numbers is a concern. It's a question.
Yeah.
I'm assuming, right, because I'm not an expert in studying this kind of data, that it's
Mm-hmm.
fairly complicated.
Yeah.
But there are some obvious things that I think we could probably point to, which is we're using technology and sort of fast, quick dopamine style
Mm.
devices with our children at an earlier and earlier age.
Yeah.
And I think that we're prioritizing entertainment over boredom in order to
Mm.
kind of discipline our children in a way, or to get unpleasant things in the household to kind of subside so that parents can
Mm-hmm.
focus on a lot of the stressors that they have in their lives from being, I believe, overworked.
Yeah.
And so then what's happening is that the children are sort of in this like lock of needing a certain amount of engagement and entertainment at all times. And then there's all this pressure on top of them to succeed and to do well by the parents. And so to get my parents' love, I have to, perform really well and exceed
Mm.
expectations. And then in addition, all of my spare time that a child needs in order to develop themselves properly,
Yeah.
where, when you were a kid, there was a lot of space for boredom. There was a lot
Yeah.
of space for self-exploration. They
Yeah.
don't have it anymore. So every spare moment they would have in developing a sense of self is now being
Mm.
filled with all these activities. They're getting shoved with devices. I mean, just things are constantly
Yeah.
entertaining them and running in that background, to the point where when they get to school, there's a sense of, if I don't perform well, I'm going to be in trouble, or I'm not going to get love.
Mm.
And I don't know how to perform well because I haven't been given the time and space to discover my own agency in a way
Mm.
to trust myself.
Yeah.
And so it's this constant need of children to rely on the external in order to perform. And then that performance anxiety just increases because of the lack of actual like self-trust with the skill. And
Mm.
so I genuinely believe that play is a huge like solution to this problem, because if you've got a kid that's like, I don't know if I can perform well, I want to do well, so mommy and daddy like praise me.
Mm-hmm.
Play is a confidence booster. It is the thing that is going to bridge the gap of not knowing and knowing, because play is the curiosity exploration of like trying to
Mm.
figure out. It's trying to get
Yeah.
from not knowing to knowing, but
Mm.
it's in a safe environment, in a safe enough way where the child feels like, they can really do it potentially.
Yeah.
And there's this sense of excitement underneath play and exploration. But if you're constantly filled with like moving screens and buttons to press that are entertaining you and keeping you pacified, then you don't
Mm.
ever have time to practice any of that. And so then you're lacking in confidence and self-trust to accomplish or achieve or
Mm.
even engage in some kind of self-agency. The
Yeah.
kids that I taught in 8th grade really lacked agency. It was
Yeah.
a fear of, I don't think I'm capable because I've never done.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, I've heard it explained this way, and it sounds kind of like what you're saying. It's like we actually like learn how to be human beings by playing. We that safe space you talked about where you can fail, but it's in a state where the consequences of failing are not dire the way
Yeah.
they can feel in other places. And then I wondered, as you were talking about the devices, it's like the device can give us a little bit of the experience of the fun of play, meaning, I'm watching somebody do something silly. That's fun. So like my brain is almost saying I've had that experience, but I
Right.
haven't, so I haven't actually gone out and done something like that myself. It's just this cartoon character doing it. And so it ends up tricking our brain. But then you show up in 8th grade or earlier, sadly, with like, you haven't built those muscles, it sounds like, to know how to respond and react and have proven to yourself that you can work through stuff because you've done it through play. Is that close to what's going on?
It's on the money. I'm really trying to encourage people, specifically adults, to see that when you are living a creative life vicariously through your phone by watching other creatives, you are lighting up parts of the brain in minor ways that mirror that experience. So you feel like you're getting something out of it that's enriching you. But in reality, it's decreasing your confidence over time because it constantly is providing this subtle messaging of they can do it, not you. Right? This is behind a wall. You're never going to be able to get over this sort of like into this fantasy space of like all of these amazing people. And the thing that's the most interesting is the coping mechanisms that we use to kind of cover that reality up is often judgment. So we'll scroll and be like, that's stupid, right? That's dumb. Like they're bad. That's, I've seen better, or I've seen more entertaining, or I've seen more impressive, which is still a cover up of our insecurity. Like the higher I think sometimes we're judging things online, the higher security is probably going to be because of the fact that we have to hide from that massive, like, existential reality that we are not exercising our freedom in our lives to become more creative, and we're sort of living through this entertainment cycle. Entertainment is not the same thing as play. Fun is not the same thing as play. Play is active, engaged attitude towards exploring your reality. It is not. And it can be an imaginative reality, but it is a reality. It is not something that someone else is providing you that you are passively consuming. That's a huge difference. I think that oftentimes people go, oh, play, like, I don't really want to talk about that or take that too seriously because it sounds like a waste of time. It's like, no, entertainment can often be a waste of time. Like fun things can be sometimes a waste of time depending on, your definition of fun. But any type of like passive consuming is never going to be associated in the same realm as play.
Yeah, as I heard that, I was thinking it's like some of those sort of entertainment and fun things might be more like distractions. Like you said, kind of like just allowing us to not deal with the stressors in our lives, and but giving us just enough of the hit to think we're actually experiencing something good. Whereas the way you're describing play, it's actually integral to a thriving life, as opposed to, and it maybe even allows us to better deal with the things that we're currently mostly distracting ourselves from. And then the other thing you said that was interesting, you talked about being a creative person. And I think we have created this belief or this thing. You hear so many people say, I'm not creative, right? I'm not creative. They're creative. And a lot of times it's the people who are doing the stuff that they're scrolling by. Oh, they're creative. And yet we miss the fact that like life is creation. Like we're literally creating every day. It may not be creative in the way we think about it, like some beautiful painting. So does engaging in play help us to see that we are in fact all creative?
That's a great question. I think an easy answer is yes, because I think they're related and integral. But I genuinely think that if you are already an adult and you already have pre-established patterns and you already have your preconceived ideas of who you are, you are going to have to go backwards and do a little bit of jackhammering, I think, to kind of open up a lot of those belief systems. I think as a child, play is a way to learn that you are creative because you're experiencing it for the first time and it's unveiling reality to you because you have no preconceived understanding yet. It's play gets you to understanding. As an adult, if you have preconceived ideas of that understanding, you are going to have to do a little bit of backwards work, I think, and go back and kind of really dig deep to find a lot of what's holding you and gripping you in those beliefs so you can loosen them up and provide a new opportunity to now play, rediscover a new understanding. But I think piling new understanding on top of old beliefs is going to feel kind of like a Band-Aid. And we'll never, and here's the thing that I think is the most important part. and this is, I'm noticing kind of popular in lots of spaces where it's like, oh, believe in yourself, like,
Mm-hmm.
follow your heart, like, all of these things that are really intrinsically true, but then
Mm-hmm.
somehow they get over distilled to a point where it's like a cross stitched on a grandmother's
Yeah.
pillow. It doesn't feel authentic anymore.
Yeah.
You have to get to a point where in order to really believe something, you have to figure out what you believe initially already and
Mm-hmm.
why you believe it so that you can provide a new alternative. But
Mm-hmm.
but sort of dumping these, I don't know, axioms on top of your belief system in hopes that it's going to change all of that foundation underneath that you developed in early childhood, it's asking a lot of a person.
Yeah.
I think that's a really hard thing to do. So playfulness can loosen up the blocks
Mm.
and get a place to rediscovery. But I think adults have to be really intentional.
Yeah.
They can't just be like, I'm going to go and play in a park and then I'm going to have a belief that I'm creative.
Yeah.
I think potentially you can have somebody that will have a eureka moment, but that's
Mhm.
usually because underneath the surface there have been months and months of little things that have been building up to that eureka moment
Yeah.
for that to happen. I don't think it's just going to happen naturally, and I don't want people to think that it's some, like, many Americans and Westerners are trained to think it's some like one fix all type situation
Yeah.
where if I just do this thing, I'm going to get my solution. I'll finally be happy,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, I think there's back leg work that needs to be done. I think you
Mm-hmm.
have to have an intention to have that goal of, I want to figure out how to become more creative, even though I currently maybe don't believe it.
Yeah.
And use playfulness as a tool to jackhammer up some of the old beliefs and figuring out who you really are and why.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the most important part, without judgment.
Yeah.
Because that's where we get extra stuck, as we go, oh, I don't believe I'm creative, and now I have shame about that,
Mm-hmm.
and now I'm not even going to explore it because that is now some big negative emotions that are scary
Yeah.
to go, so I'm just going to leave it. And
Mm-hmm.
then I'm going to put these platitudes on top and I'm going to say them out loud, but nothing in my soul or my behavior has really changed.
Yeah.
And I think that is another really important thing about creativity and playfulness. It
Mm-hmm.
also leads to authenticity. And
Mm.
when you find like the core of who you are, that's
Mm-hmm.
when you can start to create real change in your life, because
Yeah.
no longer lying, covering up things with platitudes, hiding from yourself, running. You're really meeting yourself face to face. And that, in some crazy paradoxical way, allows for things to finally start moving because you're
Mm.
accepting them as they are.
Yeah.
Um, and that's what's so cool about play is play kind of requires you to be honest.
Mm.
Creativity requires you to be honest.
Mm-hmm. So here's where I get curious about play itself, meaning what is it, right? Because I think we all have some vision of it in our head, meaning somebody says play, and maybe you're thinking about yourself at recess, kicking a ball around or playing tag or something. Um, but I imagine there's a little more to it, and you mentioned like being intentional, um, and that it ultimately can dig up a lot of stuff for us. So what does the play? What does this look like? When somebody comes to engage with some of the stuff you do, what kinds of things are they actually going to be doing, and then what happens through those processes?
Yeah. So this is where it's tough because each individual might have a different experience when engaged with an activity. So
Mm-hmm.
if I were to say play is going to a park and kicking around a ball, right?
Yeah.
That action, you're going to have somebody who's going to go to a park and kick a ball and they're going to feel depressed and bored
Mm-hmm.
and confused as to why it's not working. Then
Right.
you're going to have another person that's going to go to the park and kick around a ball and they're going to be in this engaged state where they're like learning and making experiments with their feet and
Mm-hmm.
realizing the ball goes higher if I turn my ankle this way, but then I
Mm-hmm.
tried it again and it didn't work. So what was it about my ankle turning that made the ball go
Mm.
higher? And they're experimenting and they're playing and they're in this like really engaged state. And they're both doing the same activity, but having completely separate experiences.
Mm.
So I
Yeah.
think the baseline thing that I think is the most important to know about play is that play is a state of being in the
Okay.
individual themselves. It's not necessarily the action or the behavior they're engaging with. It's the state of being or the attitude that they're oriented towards within themselves.
Mm.
But I also think in addition to that, there needs to be things that's happening between them in the external world. So Scott Eberly, who's like a play historian, I guess you could call him.
Okay.
He came up with these 6 elements of like what play is.
Okay.
Or how you can sort of identify if you're engaged in play. One of the first things, which I really try and put in my workshops, is this feeling of anticipation. So especially with the kids, where it's like, if you want to get kids really engaged in a lesson, you give them sensory pieces of anticipation. The 5th graders show up in the hallway, the door is closed, and all the lights in my room are off. I open the door, and they're like, the lights are off, Miss Bryant. Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
Come on in.
Yeah.
Right? They're like, what does that mean? So there's this sense of anticipation of, we're not sure what's going to happen next. And that immediately engages almost like our human instincts for survival, where we're like, oh, what do I need to like learn from this in order to figure it out so that I can respond, right? Which is oftentimes immediately gets us into a state of total presence and awareness. So we are present in the moment of anticipation.
Yep.
Then it moves into surprise, which is kind of like this, this bang moment where it's like, you come into the room and there's a yellow ball on a piece of cardboard with a light on it and a piece of blank paper in front of every seat. And they like sit down, and the surprise is like, there's a ball in the room with a light on it, right? And now they're like maybe disappointed with the surprise. Maybe it wasn't what they expected, but like there's still a sense of like, okay, where is this going? And I'm surprised it was this. And then you get into, let's say the actual lesson or the actual activity or whatever. And a sense of like, oh, this is what we're doing today. Like, there's this sense of like, okay, the opening question is like, write as many things as you possibly can about what you see. Do not make any assumptions. Do not like use technical terms, like only talk about as many things as is observably true about the ball and the light. Right. And so now they're like starting to write or whatever. And then comes, the pleasure aspect where it's like, now we're engaging with one another. We're connecting with one another. There's a sense of joy in discovering things that we didn't necessarily see before. And oftentimes too, in community, they notice something that you didn't notice, and they notice something that the two of them didn't notice. And there's this communal sense of like enjoyment of like, in my case, being an art teacher, learning about the observable world.
Right.
Then we move into a sense of understanding or skill, which is, again, not many people talk about this with play, but with play, like you are learning. It's so important, or else you're never going to get that satisfying feeling if you don't have some reward or boon that comes with the journey, right? So then there's a sense of like, oh, light is bouncing off of the cardboard back onto the ball and creating reflection light. And now I'm learning about how the world works in a way where I took for granted and never noticed one day in my life because there's too many things to process. But now I'm starting to see on objects like reflect light on like everything. It's everywhere. And if it's colored reflect light. And then, there's this sense of understanding and opening or expanding of their world, where before it was smaller and after play, it's bigger. And then there's this sense that this is a feeling sense that Eberly talks about, which is this sense of strength that comes from your sense of expansion and learning from the play, where it's like, now I know more.
Yeah.
And there's this strength that comes with that, where it's like, I can do and learn things. And there's like this sense of agency that comes with that, where it's like, I am capable. I am somebody that can explore. And it really, there's a sense of deep ownership in that strength. And that moves into poise, where there's this sense of almost peacefulness or gratitude from the learning and the sense of agency that comes with it. And that's what kind of kicks into the repetition of the cycle, where the poise is this sort of like integration section where you've become more than you were before. And now there's a new desire to go towards things that give you anticipation again, so that you can go through the process all over again and continue. And as young children, that's natural for us. As all like complex mammals, that's natural for us. Like we're not the only ones that are doing this. Like bear cubs are playing with one another so that they can figure out where their limitations are, so that when they go to the real world and they have to hunt to survive, they've learned the limits of their own bodies, the limits of their own capacity to think and solve problems. And as humans, we're so complex that there's a billion ways for human beings to play.
Yeah.
We can play with our minds, we can play with our bodies, we can play with, collecting things. We can play with enjoying watching sporting events. We can play by, engaging in adventure and gathering new experiences. Like there's so many different ways for human beings to play. And I think when you get into real play and you have that sense of strength and poise that comes as your reward from the play itself, you're going to get addicted to it. And that's the cool part about it. It's like, it's like, reproduction that's sort of like wired into our being, right? We have this like need and drive for sex so that we can, continue to evolve. I think we have the same thing with play. If we didn't have it, we wouldn't learn and we wouldn't as a species. Like it's detrimental to like our survival. And we're not prioritizing it as a culture. And it's no wonder why I think we're so depressed and anxious is because we have we don't have the strength and that confidence and that agency. We don't have that feeling of poise. And so therefore we go into the world and we feel weak and scared and anxious, confused, and looking to someone else to solve our problems because we don't trust ourselves to do it.
Wow. I mean, it's so interesting to me how much there is there, right? Because I think, again, if you just say the word play to an adult in particular, it feels flimsy that they just hear frivolous, silly, whatever. And then, you just talked about stuff that like is the deepest core of who we are as humans and who we are as a species and how we can actually survive and thrive in the world. Like what happened? Like what, why did we like spend so much time sort of crushing that spirit of play? I mean, is this like the assembly line mentality that we had and all that? And like, we needed to do things a certain way that was very serious and repetitive and rote and boring. And if we dared played, the whole system would break down. I mean, is it that as at least part of it?
Yeah. I mean, the research that I've done. So there's this play handbook that has a series of like, it's a series of essays or a series of work or a series of data analysis that have been pulled from all of these different places and resources from the last like 35, 40 years.
Yeah.
And there's this section about the history portion, like where did this come from? Where does it start?
Yeah.
And one of the theories is fairly complicated and it's only about the United States, which I feel like is, applicable to us. And it may explain some of the spread, that's happened as, America has influenced, quite a bit, especially the Western world. But, we come to America and we've got this deep, strong sense of Puritanism, which I'm not here to judge religion at all.
Right.
But the values there, I think, were pretty straightforward. A lot of the things that were involved, in terms of like carelessness, playfulness, those kinds of things, those were reserved for children and not adults. I think for good reason. They had to survive and they had to get to business and they had to build things and they had to like literally survive all of these very difficult conditions. And so play was not something they could necessarily afford because their environment wasn't safe.
Yeah.
Had to work very hard in order to make sure that they would survive. And so I think to them, play was like a luxury that couldn't be afforded.
Yeah.
There were still places for play that were ritualistic, that were sort of mixed in, and children had a lot of room to play, I think still back then. And then eventually we kind of come to a new world where, the car is invented and we start to essentially schedule all of this entertainment leisure time, like leisure pleasure become kind of really important to our culture and our society, looking good and feeling good, right? Because we've got products that can provide those things. And so we've got huge incentive to sell them. So if we can sell products that make people happy, right, then we're going to do that as much as possible. So we've got this idea of buy our car, buy our whatever, and it's going to make your life better. And so now we've got a lot of this unstructured free time, especially in children's lives,
Mm-hmm.
that's now being put into, we're going to sit in a car and we're going to drive around and we're going to go on vacation, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're going to structure our leisure time because that's vogue.
Mm-hmm.
And now the kids normally would be having all this unstructured playtime is now starting to become more structured. And then it becomes posh and it becomes something of the wealthy to provide violin lessons for your child and to
Mm-hmm.
provide all of these structured activities for your children
Right.
to make them smarter and better and more advanced. So like
Mm.
creativity is still happening, but it's
Yeah.
becoming more and more monetized and therefore more and more sort of packed in and structured. So we have the modern child, which has, you know, all of these activities. I mean, first of all, they're in school for way too freaking long.
Yeah.
And then they get home from school and it's time to change, get into soccer practice, get back in the van. We have to go pick up dinner. We have to pick up your sister from ballet. And then we're meeting dad because he has a work meeting and blah, blah. And it's just, life is so busy and so filled with things.
Mm-hmm.
When does a child, starting, I'm arguing from the 1990s until now, when does a child have time for unstructured nothingness?
Yeah.
Because when that child is given unstructured time, and with no entertainment or distractions to sort of like zone them out of their bodies
Yeah.
to a different world, they are now in a state where they're going to start making choices.
Mm-hmm.
I'm bored. What do I feel like doing?
Yeah.
Right? So they're learning about authenticity and honesty, and they're learning to attune to their emotions and themselves. And they're going, what do I feel like doing? Right? In your generation, I think I'd like to go get on my bike.
Yep.
And I'm bored. I'm going to just dig around and drive around. Like, what am I going to do today?
Mm-hmm.
And then when you're on your bike, you discover something because you're bored. You're looking for anticipation and surprise.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're like, ooh, abandoned car over there. Ooh, and then there's this feeling of anticipation. Should I do it? Should I not do it? Should I not do it? And like, I want to do it because I'm bored.
Yeah.
And so you go to the abandoned car and you're like looking inside and, you know, you're trying to figure out like, is anybody around? And then realize the car is really cool and it's filled with like some old stuff and some coins. So you call your friend or you go ride to your friend's house and you're like, come and look with me in this car. And now it becomes this whole afternoon of like discovering this thing. And it all unfolds into learning and then sort of self-agency of like, I can for new things and, you know, be safe about it. Or let's say a cat jumps out of it and then you're like, oh crap, like, and then you run away and you're like, I've learned that you can't just open a door to an abandoned car, you know, whatever that thing is you've learned.
Yeah.
And in today's world, children don't have that.
Yeah.
So they're not making choices. They're not exerting agency. They're not figuring out what their authentic feelings are. They're just bombarded with external stuff and scheduling and the digital age. And now, when do they have time to exert any kind of choice?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, you did a wonderful job of basically capturing my childhood because that was effectively all we did. We rode our bikes or we just kind of like hiked into the woods or like, I remember like sometimes there'd be some construction down the road and you just take your bike there and you'd explore this construction site. And then there'd be some big drainage pipe that you'd crawl into and like you'd find weird stuff in there or some critter comes out and then like, and of course at the time you don't think anything of it. It just felt normal. But I think, you know, one of the reasons you'll see a lot of folks in my generation, Gen X, kind of romanticize that, you know, like this was what childhood was like. And it's like 4 kids sitting on bikes and like, you know, a fort nearby and then like, you know, like some other silly thing that they've created or whatever, is because on some level, I think we understand how much that gave us. Yeah. It wasn't simply that it was fun, although of course it was, but like we feel what that enabled in us as adults. And I'm not saying we're running around perfectly, you know, well-adjusted adults, but I think some of that agency that you talk about, it's at least accessible to us. And what I hear you describing, and maybe, you know, sort of from the 90s on and maybe increasingly so as technology has filled those spaces, it's like kids might be really good at the violin and they might get really good at ballet and all those things that are structured, but the foundational sort of human needs we have in terms of ability to function and thrive in the world are oddly missing. And I go, what a weird dichotomy that is to like see, maybe like a 17-year-old kid ready to go to college who is like a virtuoso at some instrument, but yet can like barely fill out the college application without crying, like, and how do you, once that happens, and now we have this cohort of adults, and I would say like my generation and even people above us, we've forgotten a lot of this stuff, so we need it too. I don't want to pretend like it's only the generations who didn't get the unstructured play, but how do you help people see the need for it to really get all of this and then embrace it so that they get the value from it? Because I can see a lot of people dipping their toe in and then going, that didn't work.
Right.
What do you do, and how do you help kind of communicate all of this so that people are excited to do it and realize there's some benefit, for them on the other side of it?
Yeah, I think two things: education and routine. I think education is the thing that's going to inspire people and realize how important it is. And I think instinctually, like, again, I think it's a kind of a paradox and an irony that we have to like teach about play, because it's so instinctual. Like, you have it, like everybody has it. And that's the cool thing, is that a little bit of education can go a long way. As soon as you hear it, you start to sense it, and you're kind of like, yeah, I know what that feeling is like. Or, I mean, except for the very small exception of real people who have been so traumatized in childhood that they didn't receive play.
For sure.
And that's an outlier situation where it's like they've got a lot of work that has to be done in order to even find play for the first time.
Yeah.
But those people aside, everyone, for the most part, when they get a little bit of education, is going to go, I know what that feels like. I remember what that feels like.
Yeah.
And I think, that's the part that's going to get sort of like this engaged drive or desire for change is the hope of feeling that again, because play is so pleasurable in terms of feeling that I think we're driven towards that. And so that hopefully can kind of like get the engines going. And then two, to know that this is something like exercise, like meditation, like many practices that are going to change your life. They require diligent routine. John Vervaeke talks about how in order for you to start to learn how to live a virtuous life, you have to show up every day on the mat like jujitsu and sort of have like a dojo practice where you're like consistently showing up on a daily or weekly basis so that you can to integrate those things into your sense of self. The same goes with exercise, the same goes with meditation, the same goes with a practice of learning how to love others, and the same goes with play. Anything that's worthwhile is going to require routine, practice, and diligence. And that's where I feel like I can come in and take that burden off of people and say, I know you've got a lot going on right now. I know this is too much. I know you already have an exercise routine and a diet and whatever, and you have all of this crap that you're dealing with, and you've got kids, and you have your job, which is too demanding, and you've got like time to yourself. This is a time, however many times a week you want to show up and that you have the space to show up, for you to put aside everything and show up to the mat to play and realize that you're going to maybe suck at it in the beginning. And that's normal part of the process, just like exercise. Like you can't, there's a great analogy from a dear friend of mine who's like, I'm going to, let's say I need to like move a really heavy couch.
Yeah.
And I can't do it. What am I going to do? 15 push-ups right then and there, and then I'll be able to move the couch. Like, it doesn't work that way. Like you have to practice over a long period of time in order to get results. So I think that's where the joy of my job is. I am creating a structured environment with routine for you to come up and diligently show up to the mat and take play seriously as a way to find yourself, as a way to express your emotions, as a way to work through trauma, as a way to sort of find the edges of your limitations so that you can build confidence, as a way to agency, especially for millennials under, who I feel like were raised in a world where we didn't really get that as children, and we were helicopter parented, and we weren't allowed to go outside. We weren't allowed to spend time with our friends. We had a curfew that was strict. We were never allowed to leave the neighborhood. I mean, it was a completely different environment from the 80s. It's only 10 years that did that, and then another 10 years, and look at these poor Gen Zers
Yeah.
who are so socially anxious, many of them, that they spend 90% of their time on their phones because the external world is that scary.
Yeah. Mm. God, that's so interesting. I mean, it's sad, I think, on some level. It's like that we've gotten to this place. I love that you're doing what you're doing, and there's sort of this whole community around this, which is really awesome. I want to bring it back to the world of work a little bit, just to like help people who think about the stress they have at work and all that stuff and how this can apply. And this actually is a part of a question from our last guest, which I always like to ask guests what, a question for the next one. And this was a guy, Rex Sykes. He's a really interesting guy. He does neuro-linguistic programming with folks. He does coaching. He does some play kind of stuff as well. And he was just really curious, like in your experience, like what does it unlock in people when it comes to like how they show up at work and all the shit that we're dealing with at work and all the stuff you read about of people feeling overly stressed, or they were quiet quitting for a while and then they're, kind of just completely doing the bare minimum, or they literally are quitting and not knowing what to do with themselves. What if you build a play routine? How do I show up differently? Like, what does that look like for me now that when I'm at work?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, there's so much. But I would say probably one of the most valuable things that play is going to give you in a work environment is the ability to handle conflict so much better. Like, I think connection is such a fantastic antidote to conflict. And if you are in a routine state of play where you are expanding yourself, the expansion comes with, you can't expand without a certain amount of honesty. I didn't know this before, and now I know it, right? If you come to something and you're like, a ball with a light, yeah, I know everything there is to know about that. It's just a ball with a light, and that's it. And anyone that makes it more complicated is a moron. Right? That is lack of honesty. Play requires honesty. What is that? I'm not sure. I have gaps in my knowledge. And when you start to create a routine out of it, you realize how humbled you are by the world. And I think that kind of expansion, which also requires the paradox on the other side of humility, is if you come to a work environment and you've got someone that's really close-minded and coming to you and is like, I know what the answer is, and everyone else that doesn't agree with me is a moron.
Yeah.
You're looking at them going, I know what that's like.
Yeah.
And you humanize them. And you're no longer in this state of, I have a closed-minded view of the world, I have a closed-minded view of the world, and now I want to go home and I want to run away because it's too big of a conflict for me to handle. Playfulness expands your view of how to solve things. So if someone shows up and they're like, I'm not willing to move on this topic, or, my boss is a jerk, or, whatever, you've got this sense of like, I think I can figure this out.
Yeah.
I think I can like work through this conflict in a way that doesn't compromise their humanity or mine. And I get to a solution in a way that is, that benefits the team, because playfulness really is very community based and very communal, and it connects people together, especially when there's laughter involved.
Yeah.
It really just like loosens up your heart and allows you to be, just more grounded in a sense of self, which allows you to hold space for other people. Whereas if you're the opposite of playfulness, right, which is, fear, you're in this state of, I can't afford to lose anything I already have. It's a really extreme sense of holding. Yeah. And therefore conflict is going to attract to you like a magnet.
Yeah. God, I mean, again, it's like you've described the way it feels at work really well there. And like we run into those feelings, whether from ourselves or from others or both. And I think what you expressed that I heard that was really kind of a light bulb thing is all of this stuff that we talked about in terms of how we've squashed some of this play and experimenting as kids and the overly structured, rigid kind of life that doesn't leave any room for that. It increases our desire to hold tight onto everything, that fear. And then you mentioned this phrase, like we have gaps in our knowledge. And I thought, I can't have a gap in my knowledge. Like that's part of what I'm holding on to. If I release that understanding that there's a gap in my knowledge, I'm bad. I suck. They're going to fire me, or I need to run away. And that to me feels like the hugest gift of all of it is to flip the perspective on that, to go, oh yeah, of course I have gaps in my knowledge. I'm a human being and I'm going to have gaps in my knowledge for the rest of my life. That's cool. Now let's play together. Let's work together to figure them out.
Yeah.
And it suddenly invites rather than terrifies. So what might be an example of some of what I might experience if I signed up for one of your workshops? And I know you do them virtual and you're talking about maybe doing some kind of more in person. I mean, is it some of the stuff like you talked about with the kids, with the ball and that kind of stuff, or what am I doing?
So I think what I like to do is I like to think, as someone with like ADHD, I had so many interests that I was told by society I had to narrow down. You have to pick painting, you have to pick, ceramics, you have to pick performance. You can't do all of them. And I said, screw it, I'm doing all of them. I don't care. And so I built my own degree and I did everything. And I did a little bit of it. So kind of like very shallow and wide rather than narrow and deep. And, I got huge amounts of criticism from society from that. I want to pull in the ability to sort of say, we're doing music, we're doing art, we're doing sculpture, we're doing problem solving, we're doing puzzles, we're doing teamwork, we're doing writing, we're doing poetry, we're doing, fairy tale stories, like so many different aspects of creativity that are provided within the human experience. It's like a taste of all of them in a manageable way that anyone at any skill level can access.
Oh, cool.
But the important part is that my activities are very specifically designed to attempt as best as I can, which is difficult because every individual is different, to be slightly more challenging than where your skill is at, but not so challenging that you end up crumbling and sort of having, so much anxiety that you want to run away. And Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who's the inventor of the flow state, he talks about this is how you enter into a flow state, is that you have your challenge right above your skill level, not at it or you'll get bored, not below it or you'll be so disengaged that you'll stop immediately, or not so high that you end up giving up. And I think play is very similar. You have to have an element of challenge involved and kind of not necessarily in play a specific goal, but you have to have desire to want to find the end to the surprise, like learn something, explore something. There has to be a desire to get to the end of something. And so I provide essentially some kind of activity that says, you are going to do X, and you're like, why am I doing this? And you're like, you have 2 minutes to do this thing. And very clear, and it starts now, and you have to get involved immediately. And so now everybody's like drawing a scribble, to music, and they have 3 seconds. I'm like, why am I doing this? And then the 30 seconds stops, and it's like, okay, now you have to take that scribble, and you have a minute, and you are going to turn it into the best picture of something realistic. And it's like, so immediately now the adults are faced with a challenge. Oh my God. And it's emotional. Oh, I don't want to do this. I don't know how to draw. This is so difficult. I did something stupid and my scribble is too many lines. I don't know how I'm going to, and now they're really wrestling with themselves. That is the point of these exercises, is to get you into that emotional state and to say, play is the antidote to all of this fear. Just go, who gives a shit? Like, and then all of a sudden you're free. And weirdly, like, if you're not an artist, right? Whatever, I don't care. Like, there are skills to being an artist. Not everyone is a skilled artist. Everyone can create, but I'm not going to say like, oh, everyone is an artist. Like, no, of course, I'm not going to like lie to people. Like, if you don't have the skill, it's going to be intimidating. And then all of a sudden, once they're in a state of play, they draw a box around it, and then they make like a really cool title of like how it's a bunch of bees in a box. And I didn't put any effort into it, so it's not good. And it's like, that's not the point. You solved the problem in a way that was authentic to you. Doesn't that feel good? And they're like, yeah, it feels really good.
It does. Yeah, it does.
It feels great.
God, it's so funny because like I went on a little emotional roller coaster as you described this, from like intrigue to curiosity to anxiety.
Yeah.
I gotta just draw something for 30 seconds. What are you talking about? And then a little more anxiety when I have to turn that into a thing. And then you said, who gives a shit? And I'm like, oh yeah, right. I can just do the thing. And so like, it's funny how you kind of walked through the emotional journey that I imagine most folks are going through. And then in some ways it's like, that's part of the process that we're learning, that we can move through our emotions through play. And yeah, sometimes you are going to feel fear or anxiousness about something, in that if you play with your mindset a little bit, suddenly you can move through it and be in a different space. And that, first of all, that just seems really cool to me. But I can see the power of that, because I imagine that just etches a little something in your brain that goes, I moved through that.
Yep.
And then I'm going to come back, in 2 days and do another one, or next week and do another one. I also loved how you described all the different modalities, right? Because I think, again, most of us have a picture of play. It is that it's the kicking the ball, or it's being on a swing set, or it's whatever we either most liked or maybe most disliked as a kid. And you kind of like are running from like puzzle kind of stuff to writing and drawing and painting and sculpture and probably some kind of interactive stuff, and like, and realizing that like play is almost more of a state of mind than it is a particular set of activities.
Yeah.
That seem right?
Yeah. And I think too, if I provide a variety of different activities, it's going to teach you so much about yourself than if I were to stick with one.
Mm-hmm.
So if I were to say, we're going to do a drawing thing today, I'm going to watch in the room 5 people light up in excitement and 5 people sort of shrink into themselves.
Yeah.
And that is information. That's the information of the process. Like you want to know what things trigger you and get you really scared, and what things get you excited, what things you feel neutral about, what things you're just sort of coming in with a completely open mind and you're like, I don't care whatever we do today. Like, and you hear the prompt and you're like, yeah, I haven't changed my mind about it. I'm just here.
Yeah.
I think that's the cool part about changing modalities, is it's giving you an opportunity to learn what Dr. Stuart Brown, who's like the play research god, right? He founded the National Institute for Play, and has just done so much research in the last 25 years. And he's pretty much one of the only ones that's currently working in it. And I'm hoping it continues to expand.
Yeah.
But the goal is, for him, he talks about like there are play personalities. Like we all have things, just like in childhood, where we're drawn to over other children. If you've got a kid like me who was sitting, 19 hours out of the day, and I was tinkering with stuff and just thinking in my head, like my play world is going to be sort of more abstract than a kid who's up and running and like running into things and tripping over and climbing trees. And, their world in play is going to be different. So we've got different play personalities. And when you provide a variety of modalities, people can start to figure out like, oh, I thought I was an artist and a creator, but now that I'm playing with all of this stuff, I'm realizing I actually really like collecting things. My favorite activity was when we went outside and we collected various items to make a rainbow. And that made me the most excited and activated and alive. While another person is going to go, oh yeah, I hated that one. Good information. Now I know in my spare time when I play on my own terms, I don't need to mess with that because that's not for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that idea of play personalities. And I've become a little bit aware of Dr. Stuart Brown over time. I think Gary Ware, who was on my show, who ultimately connected us together, spoke a little bit about him and some of that stuff. And I think just that alone is freeing to realize, oh, play doesn't have to look like the thing I think is stupid, Like, and by the way, you might relearn that stupid thing is actually fun once you get to play in other areas. But realizing that we all have our roads to travel down there. Another thing that Dr. Brown says that you actually have on your site that I found really intriguing, because it's a statement that I don't know that a lot of people would connect with, or initially. He says the balanced adult life needs sufficient amounts of our preferred modes of play. So kind of what you were talking about. And I think for a large percentage of people, they would say, no, the balanced adult life doesn't need play at all. What are you talking about? Like one, either we don't think some of the things we do are play, or we just think I'm an adult now and I have to take things so seriously and blah, blah, blah. And it made me wonder, and I think about it in the context of the work you're doing and more in the context of like how we are as adults right now. Like, do we sort of need a fundamental redefinition of what adulthood looks like? Meaning we're living a model of adulthood that is maybe still grounded in some of that stuff you talked about, the Puritan work ethic and the like, I don't have time for play because I literally have to keep us alive tonight. Like, fair. But we're in a different space now for the most part. And like, we maybe haven't reevaluated the model of what adulthood looks like. And should it be rethought, and should it be rethought in a way that incorporates what Dr. Brown talks about, which is you got to spend a certain amount of time playing. I'm curious what you think of that. And if you're vibing with it, you know, what do we do to kind of reshape what adulthood looks like?
Yeah. Most adults are going to hear that and they're going to go, oh, I'm going to say, absolutely. We need to reshape. We need to put play into our lives. Number one excuse, I don't have time.
Yeah.
Right? I don't have any time for that. If I did, I would. Right? Intentions are always good. Yeah. If I did have time for this, people will be convinced. They love the idea. It sounds really great. It sounds like it would change their lives for the better, but I don't have any time. And the answer is just so painful. Yes, you do, but you have to make the sacrifice to take away the immediate pleasures in your life, the entertainment things, the things that are filling your time and your space, like living through other creatives through your phone, spending so much time doing what? Watching 4 kids on bikes run around in a fantasy world on Stranger Things, right? Like we're wishing that we were in this space, daydreaming about it through all of this, media. And it's have to get rid of the non-reality and sacrifice it and bury it and, burn it like a ritual and then allow reality to come to you and realize that is going to be a really arduous journey at first because oftentimes we have to meet a lot of pain and a lot of like whatever we're running from is in that space. And so the lack of time issue is you don't have a lack of time. It's often a lack of discipline, a lack of will, a lack of drive, and it's usually being run again by fear. And play is the antidote to fear. So like the more play you have in your life, the more you're going to be able to let go of all of this stuff that you're holding on out of fear of like reality with yourself and experiencing that radical honesty with yourself and seeing all of the things that, are putting you on autopilot that you're running from. And that's hard because I don't want to blame the individual. I don't want to be like, you're not individually disciplined enough, like shape up, grow up, like get your shit together. Because we're bombarded in a society with structure that almost doesn't allow you any other option. And the only way for you to get out of that structure in society is to rebel. And who wants to rebel and get a target put on their head?
Yeah.
Right? Like, there's a lot of risk involved with this. So the thing that inspires me, that I think can inspire other adults to change their lives, is to get excited about rebelling against a system that isn't working for you and your family. Like, this is about fighting the good fight. We need a good fight. We have so much anxiety and so much stagnancy that I think the thing that can save us is this desire to have something to push up against and to achieve and to climb over. And play can do that for you. And so I think a simple way is to, sign yourself up for something, like it doesn't obviously have to be me, but to sign yourself up for something that's in your play personality world where it's like, okay, I like collecting. Like me personally, Renee likes to collect. Once a week, I'm going to it doesn't have to cost money. Like, stop thinking of money. Like, we don't have money. I don't have time, right? It can't, so much is put into our heads, right? That's just so not true. Once I'm going to go out, I'm going to go on a nature walk and I'm going to collect 5 rocks that I love. And an adult's going to go, oh, that's so dumb. Like, I don't need rocks. And it's like, need the experience of collecting the rocks. You don't need the rocks. the experience of collecting the rocks and experiencing time with yourself and like learning to let go of this to gain this. Like that's in reality. Like we'll move towards that. And small things like that, I mean, they're so big and no one ever does. They think, oh, what a great idea, but they don't set aside the time and do them. Like get out your technology, put the thing in the technology, have it remind you and be like, okay, it's for me Saturday morning, I'm going to go collect my 5 rocks. Yeah. And it's 10 minutes. And then all of a sudden you're like, I feel 10,000 times better. It's listening to a part of yourself that's been ignored for centuries by living vicariously through all these other people. And now all of a sudden you're like living in reality. You're like, I'm not good enough though. I'm not like on their caliber. No, you're
doesn't matter.
Who cares? You're never gonna get there, and you're certainly never going to get there by meandering and you know, it could by consuming all of it and not engaging in it and practicing skill. So I would say solving the problem, I'm not going to pretend is something that's going to be necessarily pleasurable or easy in the beginning stages, because we're on a lot of it's damage control, I think. Yeah.
It's like, I like though that you're offering a way to break it down into something a little more bite-sized, meaning like I don't just suddenly have to be a person who has like 10 hours of play in my life every week. Like, you know, do the little nature walk or dance around the house for 20 minutes or whatever your thing is. And, you know, I even think about like, sometimes for me, it's almost more like microdosing play, where it's like literally like a goofy moment between me and my wife where we're just like being playful. And that got me wondering about, you know, is there a step of even just like looking at your life and doing a little, like, it sounds so serious, but like a play audit, meaning, am I playing somewhere, and where am I, and what do I feel when I do it? And what is it telling me about where else I might have more opportunities? Meaning if you have these tiny little moments where you are being playful, whether it's telling jokes or dancing or, you know, going outside and just listening to the birds and like trying to figure out which bird sounds they are, like any of those, like realize like that there's something there. And then that becomes like the little nugget that you can then build upon. And there was one other thing you said that I want to come back to too, which is you may unearth some stuff by doing this, right? Like the stuff you've been kind of running or shielding yourself from. Is the act of play, you know, as a means of doing the jackhammer to some of that stuff, does it also allow you to deal with that stuff in a way that is less just pure pain? You know, because there's pain underneath some of this stuff, right? And it is going to be revealed. Does the act of play help you manage your experience of that at all?
So I'll do the second one first and the first one second.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, because it's a lighthearted approach to holding and managing all of that pain. So when you look at something playfully, I love this phrase that's like, so what? Now what? Right? So like you find out that you have some kind of ugly behavior pattern that's been around for what feels like centuries. And it's hurting relationships in your life. So what? Now what? There's a playful approach to that pain. And for you to go, okay, I'm accepting that this has been my reality. I can kind of see where it came from. It's not 100% my fault, but it is 100% my responsibility. So like, accepting it comes with no judgment. And then like accepting the pain, no judgment. And then accepting responsibility comes action, right? So there's this sense of like, I'm not going to judge myself for how I got here, because the fact that I am now looking at it in reality is a feat, a heroic feat that I should be proud of for discovering this and realizing where my gap is. And simpleness allows you to not be so worked up about the judgment. It goes, okay, I discovered the thing. There's a gap, a huge hole. What do I do? And that's the thing that's cool about play, is that it invites action. It invites another step. If you're stuck in shame, you're not moving anywhere. So it's like serious play. Like there's both together. Like you're not just going, oh, I found out I'm a narcissist. And then you don't do anything about it. You're not
Yeah.
assuming responsibility, right?
Mm-hmm.
But playfulness can kind of unearth, I think, a lot of the shame that comes with the self-discovery.
Yeah.
Like for me, I've been addicted to my phone for 13 years.
Yeah.
It's been 13 years of true social media addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm having to look at that in the face, cry about it, weep over it, grieve over it.
Mm-hmm.
And playfulness is allowing me to go, did I have another choice?
Yeah.
Yes, you did have another choice, and you're stupid, and you did. Okay, yeah, you're right. Yeah, I hear you. You're logically correct, and this is what play is good at. Play is good at and.
Yeah.
And it can go, and I understand why I ended up in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, I'm here. Now what?
Yeah.
And that's when all of a sudden it's like, and I signed myself up for like a course to try and like help my social media. Like I signed up that day.
Mm-hmm.
And I think without playfulness, I would have taken the shame too seriously. I would have taken the pain too seriously. And then I would have brooded about it and been like, that's special. Everybody's addicted to their phone.
Exactly.
It's like, that's what's being done to us. Like, look at all the people that were smoking cigarettes for like,
right.
a couple hundred years or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was kind of done to them. Like most people in the 50s didn't have a choice. Like you were smoking. Right. Like you wanted to
pretty much
and
a given.
Escape it. So now you're breathing it in your environment, and now you're addicted just from secondhand smoke. It means your environment oftentimes that's really doing a lot of this effort. So yes, playfulness helps you with processing pain in a huge way because it helps you hold things with open hands lightly, upturn, and then things can move.
Mm-hmm.
Gripping and that holding, no room for gaps.
Yeah.
Secondly, to answer your question about the play audit.
Yeah.
Dr. Stuart Brown talks about finding your play history.
Okay.
So it's finding a sense of, it's finding a sensed feeling within the body and the mind and the spirit that comes from your past. He recommends starting it from your childhood in the beginning and sort of going, okay, when I remember this massive amount of engaged state of play, excitement, discovery, like jot those down. You don't have to jot down many, like maybe 5 to 10. And then start to notice the trend. Oh, I like to play mermaid a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I like to sing songs really loudly with my friends a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I like to collect acorns and make dolls out of leaves and then trade those for more acorns. Right? And it's like, okay, like that's my play history. And now I'm looking at the play personalities and I'm going, oh, I'm a performer.
Yeah.
And I'm a collector.
Yeah.
Right? And now you can move that in time forward to your present and go, okay, now that I know I'm a performer and a collector, that's two of my maybe many play types, but those are my top two.
Mm-hmm.
When was the last time I've performed and felt a sense of play in my body and in my spirit? And when was the last time I've collected something and felt sense? Oh yeah, when I hit that amazing Goodwill streak like 2 months ago where I found the best pair of pants ever. I was in a state of play in that moment, in that Goodwill. And then the other time, I've performed many times, but the time that I was in a state of play was this one particular time when I felt like I was engaged with the audience and I was communicating with them in a way where I wasn't blocking them out of fear.
Yeah.
That performance was the one where I was in a state of play in. And now you can go, oh shit, I've only played twice in 3 months.
Yeah.
I'd like to do that more now that I'm looking at the fact that this is a really low frequency for me. I might be delighted by realizing I thought it was going to be 0, but look at that. I am an artist or creator, and I make these cute little designs in my children's notes in my lunchbox, in their lunchbox every day.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize it, but like I'm actually creating on a daily basis in a small way. And then there's this delight of realizing like, oh, it hasn't died.
Yeah.
It just found its way into my adult life and I still have it. And then there's excitement about doing it in a bigger space, like upping the level, upping the challenge. Now you're doing it in your child's lunchbox. Now let's take maybe an art class or like let's do something that's a little bit bigger of a project that requires drawing or whatever. And I think that's the cool thing about an audit over a long period of time is you find out what your play personality is, see how that applies to your adult life, and try to find more opportunities to do that in the future.
I love that. I want to do that. I think I will do that because I find it intriguing, and my brain already went back, and I was like, I definitely was kind of an explorer. That was for sure, and I'm curious what else shows up. I want to get us to a few final questions. And one, we talked about the question from our previous guest. I want to give you a chance to ask our next guest a question. So her name is Elaine Boyd, and she works with a lot of businesses to bring some process and automation to the chaos, right? So much of us right now, we're feeling that sense of chaos, when it comes to our work. And it allows, what her work does is allows people to get stuff done and actually step into their sort of zones of genius. So what would your question for Elaine be?
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, I love this concept and I'm very excited to listen to that. So my question would be, as someone who works from home with ADHD and dealing with all kinds of chaos and managing it myself, right? I want to figure out how to effectively use like AI to help me take out so much unnecessary wasted time that's coming from disorganized sense of, trying to figure out how to organize my own life takes up too much time because I'm not very good at it. Yeah. And I want to outsource that to AI so that I have more time for play and more time for the, right? Like we don't have time. Like I think this is a great solution for like the not time problem is that AI could like help you manage your grocery list and manage all kinds of stuff in your life.
Yeah.
With ADHD specifically, oftentimes getting into the program, typing out the thing is often really daunting.
Yeah.
Is there a cool way to automate like a personal assistant to kind of prompt you in your life? So it's prompting you rather than you having to prompt it. Because I know it's got to be out there. I just am not well versed in this world and I'm super curious.
Oh gosh, I can't wait to pass that along and hear her answer. One, because it will be great for you to hopefully have an answer that allows you to step into that. And I think there's so many of us who feel some version of that, meaning it's daunting because one, there's so many choices. There's so many AI solutions out there. And then, like you said, for some of us, it may be like daunting to simply like try the first thing because, well, then what? And then the distractions multiply actually because there's so many choices. So I will pass that along and we'll see what she says. And I hope we get an answer that we can at least feel like we can make some progress with. Because I think that's a challenge for so many people right now is managing their time in a way that you get to really focus on what you care about. Yeah. God, I love that. Coming back to the world of work a little bit, we talked about all this play stuff and I'm super intrigued by it and what it can do for the world of work. If you could kind of wave a magic wand and make work fully desuckified, what does that world look like to you?
I just have this vision of like people coming into like a meeting room and they've got like a really cool boss and the boss is like, okay guys, today, and then there's an element of anticipation and surprise. Yeah. It's on a weekly basis, right? Where it's like, they're going to, let's say they're a firm that sort of comes up with, I don't know, solutions for engineering problems that have to do with vacuum cleaners or something. Okay. And then every week they take a break from all of it and they have a play exercise on a weekly basis where they're like, okay, we are going to invent the best way to wash your dishes without any kind of current modern technology. It has to be the best and most efficient way. And you've got an hour and you're going to come back to me and you're going to pitch your idea. Or you've got 15 minutes. Make it really challenging and make it even more silly. And then all of a sudden you've got all of these individuals in the group that are showing their creativity and they're going, I think we could wash dishes with dolphins. And we're going to like squeeze on them and get the spout to go on or whatever. And like and it's ridiculous and it's silly on purpose. You're learning about each other. You're connecting with each other. You're laughing with each other. And what you're also doing that's even more beneficial to a work environment is you are creating an opportunity for you to experience in your somatic body what it feels like to open possibilities that you didn't think were there before. Now you go back to your regular work and all of a sudden, boom, eureka, you just got hit with an idea. Or, ooh, you thought about that in a completely different way. And so play not only like helps relationships in a work environment, but it helps problem solving. It can really get that grip of, I know everything, I have no gaps, and therefore it's this solution or no solution to,
Yeah.
oh, there's so many gaps in my knowledge. What if we thought about it this way? What happens? What happens? What happens? And now there's so much more collaboration and creativity that's coming into the work environment that creates a sense of excitement and drive. And it can be something silly and small, or it could be something that's more long term where you do a series of them that, that are all. But I think a really strong leader could invite playful things on I would say a multi-weekly basis to get people to feel like they're really connecting and getting to know each other on a human level. The more laughter that's shared in a work environment, the more you're excited to get up and go and be a part of it every day.
Yeah. I feel like laughter is the most accessible example for people of that sort of somatic shift in ourselves, right? Like we've all experienced just how good it feels to laugh and how it completely like scrubs our brain of stuff that's getting in our way. So I fully agree with you there. I really like the idea. Couple things. One, the benefits are just awesome, both the sort of interpersonal benefits, but that idea of opening the mind to sort of big possibility. I think, I come from the world of advertising where that is like literally the job. And yet there's so much stress and anxiety in so many ad agencies these days that I think people end up retreating to the space of gripping tight. And I figured out a way to do this. And this is the only way to do it. And if you do it my way, it's going to be great. And that shows up in leaders who are like, do it my way, damn it. And that shows up in people who are like, this is the thing I know how to do. I hope you like it. And so.
And our kids.
Yeah, very much so. And so like giving people an invitation to remember, that part of the brain that is probably what got them so excited to work in a creative field like advertising in the first place, and go, oh yeah, I like when that brain part opens up and I get to just like see all the limitless possibilities. I think right now, at least in that world, and probably in a lot of businesses, because there's a lot of stress, we're sort of trying to force it. You need to be innovative, damn it. You need to be creative, damn it. Why aren't we being more innovative? And it's like, well, duh. Like, that's not how it works. So I think however somebody chose to engage with play, whether it's the weekly exercise, the multi-weekly exercise, weaving it in and out where they see opportunity, it just makes so much sense to me. So I am fully on board with that approach for sure. Yeah. And
I'll modify a little bit and say too, like sometimes it shouldn't come from the leader.
Yeah.
Sometimes it needs to come from the employees, where it's like the employer or the leader is going to say, I'm going to give you 2 hours of unstructured time, but you have to put your phone in a basket. And you have to put your laptop away. Yeah. And then you've got an opportunity, just like we need to create for our children, in an adult space where you've got unstructured time to play and to kind of create a game or to do something that's self-led by the group. It's really important for children to be able to do that, because if you're mom and dad and you're like, you need to play, and here's these activities that I found on Pinterest, I printed them all off for you, look at all the work I'm doing, and now you need to execute it so that you can be happy and you can make me less stressed. Right? That's how we feel as employers. We're like, oh my God, like you're rolling your eyes and you want to die, because it's coming from an authentic, real place. There's no trust. And you now are being told to do something which is not a state of play. That's not playfulness. It has to be self-led. So sometimes it's also just about creating an unstructured environment within a structured amount of time.
Yeah.
And letting people do what they want. And they might start playing Magic the Gathering together. And then you go, oh, look at that. Every Wednesday, now all of a sudden I've created this routine where these 10 people go and play Magic the Gathering, and then the other 20, they just talk and socialize and they get lunch together.
Yeah.
That's fine. That's still good enough. Like, let them kind of, because now they go, my work is so great. They let us do what we want every Wednesday for 2 hours, and we spend time together, and we can play Magic the Gathering or do whatever. And now all of a sudden I have a sense of purpose and drive to go back because my needs are getting met.
Yeah. It's so wild as I hear that. I think like, well, there's a couple things that I hear. One is the importance of modeling behavior, meaning if a leader comes from a place of playfulness and starts to open and engage that, then the team starts to feel permission to do that. And then when you give them these opportunities of free, unstructured time, they go all in on it because the trust has been built by going, oh yeah, she's doing it, so I guess it's okay. And then it kind of came back to this idea of like what adulthood can mean and look like, and maybe even in our workplaces. Like there's Jonathan Haidt, the psychologist and professor, I believe. He's got this whole movement around like I don't know what he calls it, free play or something like that. And it's about kids, but like really making that integral to what adult life looks like in at workplaces. So when you talked about like just having 2 hours of unstructured time, like making that an expectation of like, this is part of what it means to work, that you get unstructured time to then go just sort shit out and lean into your playfulness so that you're going to be better equipped as a human being to solve problems ultimately, right? So it's like a mirror of what Haidt's doing in the kid world is kind of like what I feel like you're starting to like put into place on the adult side of things. And I think it's really needed.
Yeah. And I think too, it can be a litmus test as an employer. If I don't want to give 2 hours of unstructured time. We don't have that kind of time. We can't afford that kind of time.
Yeah.
And they're not going to use it well anyway. They're just going to do something stupid.
Yeah.
And then you give them the 2 hours of time and then they use it in a really poor way and they all go home and they don't want to get in. They're like, well, if you're going to give me 2 hours of unstructured time, I'm going home. Right. And I'm going to let out the dog. I'm going to take care of my kids. Blah, 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 blah. And it's like, and now the employer is like, I'm super angry because now I've given you this special privilege and you're wasting it, you're not utilizing it. There's something else wrong with your culture.
Yeah.
That doesn't have anything to do with the goodness that can come from 2 hours of unstructured time that you can give for employers. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the thing that a lot of times will hold people back is the fact that, again, they want to hold on to all of these beliefs about themselves and they don't want to look at the honest, humble reality that maybe their leadership isn't sufficient. Maybe something about the environment is really unhealthy and toxic. And and that's the thing that's keeping them from moving into that space. And so play becomes this enemy because play is going to shine the light on that. And it's going to cause a lot of like stress for some people, especially in leadership, to go, oh my God, I'm not doing a good job. If these people don't like me or trust me. Yeah. And again, like play has to come from a sense of safety and trust as a child and as an adult. You have to have a certain amount of safety for play to work. If you're in war zone, if you're a Puritan who's trying to survive, if you're in a sense of I am activated and I have to survive and I'm hyper aware and I'm alert and all of these stressors are happening, you can't play. So if you're in that environment at work and you give 2 hours of unstructured playtime and everyone's so burnt out that all they can do with that 2 hours is completely disassociate, turn off, or like rush and take care of other things because they finally have time for the first moment in their lives. That is a sign something's wrong.
Yes, it is.
Play will shine the light on reality and tell you whether or not something is healthy because play is such a great litmus test for how the being and how the social interactions are really working together or apart.
Yeah, and I think the room for growth here, framing it as positively as I can, is really common. I think that people might experience play initially that way because all of the social pressures and all of the world has kind of created a lot of that. And so it will take a little bit of work in the form of play to get out of that. And so what I hope is that people are open to exploring it and that they're open to being a little patient with it because, like you said, you can't just do the 15 push-ups and be like, I'm fixed. I'm a playful, productive human being again, and I can go back to like sitting in front of my computer for 22 hours a day. So speaking of playfulness, another thing I like to ask folks is to make a sound effect. And if you've listened to my show at all, you'll hear sounds kind of in the intro and the outro of the show. And I do some cat sounds and other stuff in mine, but there's lots of other stuff. So are you up for making a desuckified sound for the show?
Oh, I'm so ready. As
Yeah.
someone who loves improv, I almost don't even want to know what to expect.
Excellent.
So do I just go
Let's
for it?
just
I
do
mean,
it. Let's go for it.
I'm just
Yeah.
excited. Okay, all right, I've got one. I'm ready. That's what I got.
That is really freaking hilarious. It kind of brought me back a little bit to like Fred Flintstone running on tippy toes a little bit. Kind of, yeah, it kind of gave me a little bit of that sound, but regardless, again, it's one of those purely felt experiences. Like it's hard to listen to that and not laugh, or at least smile.
Yeah. And two, want to do it yourself. Except
Yeah,
oftentimes we just
contagious.
and here's the thing too, like whatever listeners are out there, and you're like, you hear the sound and you immediately are filled with judgment, and you're like, dumb.
Yeah,
Like that's information. That's
yeah,
information. That's so much information because like if you were to be in the woods alone by yourself and just do like for 12 full seconds into the ether, you
yeah,
knew no one could hear you. I
yeah.
bet your ass you would feel so good afterwards. You wouldn't even believe it. And that's the crazy thing about it is it's just there's so much societal pressure and judgment around, just letting yourself be
Yeah.
and play. And so, yeah, I get it. It's a tough, tough, tough thing. And working with eighth graders, oh boy, they've got so much fear, and that's normal and healthy. And yeah, overcoming that is the journey.
Yeah, and here's hoping we can get more of us adults to embrace this playful side of ourselves so that we're modeling that behavior more for our kids and maybe starting to allow them a little more freedom to play so that when people get to eighth grade, yeah, there's going to be some of the normal eighth grade pressures of, you're in the throes of puberty and all the awkwardness, but at least feeling like I think I can find my way through this. It's going to be weird and awkward and yucky at times, but I'll find my way through that. To me, that feels like what you and other folks in the play community are putting into the world. And so on that note, I want to give folks a chance to know more about what you're doing and how they might be able to connect to it. So how can people find you online or elsewhere?
Yeah, so I'm mainly on Instagram.
Okay.
I have a website, and I'm also on TikTok.
Okay.
I am the Play RX Cure on like all platforms. I'm the playrxcure.com. I'm the playrx cure on Instagram, and I'm the playrx cure on TikTok.
Cool.
And I'm currently located in Phoenix, Arizona, and doing in-person workshops in various places kind of all around, which I post on my social media. So like local Phoenicians, they can kind of find me in person. And then virtual workshops right now are once a month, and currently they are completely free. And I'm really excited about being able to offer that because I feel like it really incentivizes people to not get so like overwhelmed. I just don't want to be a part of like the whole like buy my whatever for this. It's just like like I want to be the change that I want to see in the world, right? So there's this sense of just like show up, play with me, have a fun time, get your creativity back, go back to your day-to-day life, crave it a little bit more, and then start incorporating it into your life. And yeah, I've got a free play jar that I've created for people to make themselves. It's like a PDF. Has over 150 ideas that you literally, they're cuttable. So you cut them out, you fold them, you put them in a jar, and then when you've got a little bit of unstructured playtime that you've set aside for yourself, you open the jar, you dig around, you pull it out, and you might even pull out a specific color that you want to deal with that day because they're categorized by color.
Okay.
And you might open them up and say, okay, I'm going to go pumpkin like picking today. Like that's what I'm going to go do. And then you execute it. And then that kind of takes out this stress, especially for people with ADHD, of having to plan play because that feels so unfun that it's just easier to take out your phone and pull up Netflix. But when you've got a play jar, literally it's right there and all you have to do is just pull one out. And so that's available for free on all three of those platforms. I've got it available to download, and it's a great way to just kind of like add some play into your life without having to think about it.
I like that. And I like the idea of it both because of what it is and what it does, but also it feels like a nice little visual element. You talk about the different colors and it immediately shifts the mindset a little bit. Like that looks fun.
Yeah.
And makes it very appealing. Well, Renee, this was such a fun conversation. I am excited, inspired, motivated to try some new things. And I hope our listeners are as well. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited. And for everyone listening, go freaking play. I swear to God.
I love it. On that note, we'll say goodbye. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in to the DesuckifyWork Podcast. And a huge thanks to Renee for bringing her delightful energy and deep insight to the show. If you enjoyed the episode, please like, share, rate, review, subscribe, or consider traveling to Gotham, buying the bat signal from the police department, and reconfiguring it to send up an alert when you're in need of emergency work desuckification. You can follow Renee on Instagram and TikTok at ThePlayRxCure, and check out her site at theplayrxcure.com. She has some awesome resources to help you bring more play into your life. And if you're in the Phoenix area, keep an eye out for her in-person play workshops. Speaking of play, my site and my Substack newsletter are pretty fun too. Check them out. I'm on a mission to make work suck less, and I would love for you to join me. Want to make that desuckification happen ASAP? Let's set up a free half-hour coaching session. Bye, everyone.